Hello everyone and welcome to our latest webinar, Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Field Services. My name is Gareth Boyle, the Senior Marketing Executive for Microsoft here at Fusion 5, and I'm joined today by CEC Consultant Nathan Blomfield, Microsoft Solutions Strategist Troy Gerber, CEC Consultant Philip Matthew, Microsoft Country Manager Christy Brown, and CEC Consultant Amor Herbst. Before I hand over to our first presenter, just a few quick bits of housekeeping. The first part of today's session will take you through some live demonstrations of field services in action, followed by a short Q&A towards the end of the presentation. If you do have any questions as we go along, you can actually ask them via the top right-hand corner of your browser or Teams application, and we'll address them during the Q&A. In addition, a recording of today's presentation will be sent out to our attendees and those who couldn't make it for your perusal as well. So without further ado, let's kick things off with our first presenter, Christy Brown. Christy.
Kia ora koutou katoa and g'day. It's great to have you all here today, and so thank you very much for making the time. I'm not here to talk to you about anything technical. I'm really here just to talk about a few customers that we've done this stuff for. We've got plenty of customers in our portfolio. We actively support around 800 or so per month, but we thought we'd showcase just a few stories to get up front so that you can kind of get those creative juices percolating to think about, well, how might this actually work for me and my business? And then after that, we're going to go through a bit more information on the product, and we're courageously going to give you a real live demonstration. So let's all collectively pray to those demo gods that they're kind to us today, as this is real world stuff, no smoke and mirrors. So anyway, without further ado, the customers that we have that I thought I'd showcase today really represent a real diversity in terms of ways in which different organisations can use the field services module for their benefit. And I mean, typically speaking, what we start to see is there's either two flavours. There's the type of customer that are working deep within assets themselves and servicing, perhaps it's equipment that they manufacture or that they supply and have to maintain. Or we're seeing, and even more likely, businesses that just have staff on the field, out on the road that they need to manage and give really smart ways of working so that they can be more effective in their roles and spend more time doing the value add stuff, which is actually face to face with your customers, as opposed to in the car furiously trying to get the administration right before they turn up on that customer site. So with that spirit in mind, a few different examples that really do illustrate that well. So we've got Jacobs Dow Egberts here, JDE as we know them. These are an international organisation which acquired, for those who are joining us from New Zealand, the Bell 10 Coffee Company, which are a very historic brand here in New Zealand. Jacobs Dow Egberts are in the business of supplying coffee machines to all sorts of corporate environments, including to the Koru lounges for Air New Zealand, if you're familiar with getting your coffee from their machines there. So the intent of the solution for Jacobs Dow Egberts is really enabling them to provide the opportunity to have not only clarity in terms of where their technicians are and the work in which their technicians have to execute, but also the assets themselves. So they do a great job of tracking and knowing where every one of their coffee machines are at any one time, as well as that service history on the machine, and they can start to then talk about being a little more proactive in the servicing versus always waiting for something to break, which is hugely beneficial. When we're looking at life care consultants, this is a perfect example of I like to call life care my small and mighty customer. They're here in New Zealand and they provide occupational health and safety type services, flu vaccinations, first aid training and the like to organisations and some very large brands such as Fonterra. And so for life care consultants, their field services application is providing visibility and transparency into where their nurses are at any one time. They know which site they need to visit next, and they can see that traceability in terms of when that visit has occurred, etc. So that one's really about the human side of field services and making sure that people are well organised and know what they're doing in their day. Integrated Technology Solutions, these guys are a subsidiary of the Linfox Group and they operate Trans-Tasman. They provide for the components within the parking meters and also ATM machines. And so again, this one's a bit of a blend of both assets and technicians. It's about knowing where the technicians are and what jobs they need to do. Now, whereas Eastpak, for those of you that exist within the the rural centre of New Zealand, you'll know that they're quite a large pack house and kiwi fruit orchard company. Their field service solution is aimed at their spraying divisions, so they're able to know what sprays to put on, what orchards, when. As you can appreciate, it's pretty important that they get that stuff right, and so their field service solution enables them to have that transparency and control over their process. And then finally, Manningham City Council, not the only council we work with in this capacity, but in terms of the council services, if you think about it, it's a really diverse range of services that they're providing for their citizens. And Manningham City Council starts their journey in customer engagement, creating a simple support ticket. And when it's appropriate, it needs to be executed to a field officer. Again, that's all happening within the field services solution and its framework, even to the extent of perhaps you have a pothole that needs to be inspected, or there's a pollution event that's occurred, maybe something's been dropped into a river or something that shouldn't be there. And so, yeah, it's a great solution that brings all of those various facets of the organisation together into that single mobilisation story. So that's enough from me. I think hopefully that's given you a little bit of understanding about how we can make this real and practical. And now I'll hand over to Nathan, who will show you a little bit more about the product. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. Cool. And thank you for those of you in attendance today and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend. The areas of field service I'll be focusing on today is providing an overview of the early stages of the field service lifecycle, from delivering, delving into what a work order is, how to raise a work order, and the different facets a work order can be raised from. So how repeatable incidents can be used to help streamline raising work orders and tracking tasks, products, inventory, and time and materials against the work order, and how assets can intertwine with work orders. So I'm just going to read off this slide here just to give you guys a brief overview of what a work order is in Dynamics 365 Field Service. So a work order has information on what work needs to be done. Work orders are used to coordinate and schedule resources and activities, and they can be used for different types of work, such as installations, repairs, or preventative maintenance. So before we get into creating a work order, I wanted to outline the different ways work orders can be raised in field service. So there are many facets of raising a work order within Dynamics 365 for field service, where in certain industries which are heavily focused on sales and the outputs being a service is to be provided or a product is to be installed, Microsoft Dynamics 365 for sales and field service can be leveraged together to allow your sales team to raise opportunities and convert these into work orders. So these work orders would then be picked up by another team after it's handed over from your sales team, and then a team would then provide a service or install that product onto the customer location. So another facet of field service and raising work orders is using agreements. So agreements are most commonly used for maintenance schedules, where an organisation must perform daily, weekly, or monthly inspections on equipment, where a work order can be automatically raised through the system and then picked up by a technician to carry out. And lastly, case management within Dynamics 365 for customer service and field service can be leveraged together. We're needing to track individual customer incidents and inquiries across different streams of services. Cases can be converted into a work order, where an incident might require someone to be on site to carry out a service or resolve an issue. And then leading on from this, what I'll do is I'll take you through a demonstration where a case has been raised for a faulty product and how we convert that into a work order, which is to get someone scheduled out on site to troubleshoot and resolve that issue. So without any further ado, I'll bring up Dynamics 365 Field Service. So for this demonstration, I won't get into too much detail on the customer service elements and raising a case, as I just want to show you how a work order can be raised from other facets of the system to extend your typical day-to-day workflow. So what we have here on the screen is we have a case that has been raised by a customer of ours, where they have phoned in about a faulty barista grade coffee machine. You can see here we have identified the product that's broken, who the customer is, and what is the issue that they are facing. So now at this point, we are ready to convert this case into a work order to then schedule out a technician to go on site and do some troubleshooting and fix the broken product. So in Dynamics 365 for field service, we can convert our case to a work order by clicking on the Convert to Work Order button up the top of our screen. So here you can see a work order has been created, and some of that key information that was created when the case was raised has also been carried over onto the work order. So we know who the customer is and who the billing account is. For example, we might want to charge a head office account for the time and materials we spent on a job. You'll see that the work order is created in an unscheduled state, and at this point of the process, the work order hasn't been scheduled against the technician, but once it is, this system status here will be updated to a scheduled state. So these system statuses, just a bit of background information, they aren't configurable, and they are set by the system and act as different stages that the work order is at. However, we can configure different sub-statuses to provide more detail for the work order. So for example, if we are traveling on site and we want to show back at head office that we are traveling onto customer site, we might have a sub-status there for traveling. So next you can see that the work order type here has been set. So this will differ from job to job, where some jobs are preventative maintenance based, where your technicians require going out on site once a month to do a service on a particular customer asset. And then you can also set up your own custom work order types. So for example, break fix type jobs, when we're sending out a technician to go on site for an unknown customer issue, we would consider that work order type as a break fix work order type. So for today's webinar scenario, the scenario I'll be running through is setting up a work order to service a broken coffee machine. And then next on the work order here, you can see that there's a price list that I've set. So price lists are pulled through from the service account, and different customers can have different price lists set up against them based on the contractual agreements between yourself and the customer, based on different pricing that has been agreed between yourself and the customer. You might have different pricing around replacement products that aren't under warranty, or if a customer isn't under contract, you might have some different pricing around how much those replacement parts will cost when carrying out a service. So now you can see here I've put in a primary incident type. And these primary incident types, just for a bit of background information, they act as a template for repeatable services that have a similar workflow of tasks that require carrying out. So this is incredibly helpful for compliance-based jobs where we need key activities to be checked off before we finish off a job. Okay, so I'm going to move up to the top of the screen here, and firstly I'm going to click on this products tab here. So when we're going on site as a technician, when we're carrying out a service, if we've replaced any parts on a customer asset, we can track those parts as a product against the work order to then charge onto the customer at a later stage. And then on the services tab here, we can add any services for our time and materials that we've spent on a job. So we might want to bill the customer for any time where they're not under contract. And then kind of delving into the service tasks tab here. So back when I added that primary incident type onto the work order, that acted as a template here for the service tasks that need to be carried out when working on a work order. So these will be ticked off by the technicians when they carry out a particular service. So from a compliance perspective, we can check off that everything's been done in chronological order and nothing's been left off. And along the top here, we've got the location of the job that's been carried out. So this is quite useful for your technicians to understand where a work order is being carried out. And this can natively, so if you're using the field service mobile application and we want to get directions from our current location to our customer address, we can look at clicking on the service address here, and that would bring up your native mobile maps app and give you the required directions to customer site. So without further ado, that kind of wraps things up from creating a work order. Next, we'll move on to the scheduling side of things. We will be scheduling a work order against a technician or crew, which I'll hand over to my work colleague, Philip, to lead into.
Fantastic. So good morning, everyone. So what I'd like to walk through today is the scheduling component of field service. So scheduling is obviously one of those key phases in the life cycle of a work order. It involves two main parts, so requirement building and then actually allocating resources to meet that requirement. Now, just before we do dive into the functionality of it all, I want to briefly familiarize everyone with arguably the most foundational pillar of the field service product, which is the schedule board, which is what you can see here on screen. So this is the centralized place to allocate work, monitor workloads, and essentially ensure the delivery of your services are met in a timely and appropriate manner. So over the past several release waves, the schedule board has seen a series of incremental improvements. So generally focused on providing a better set of capabilities. For those that are familiar with field service to date, in the upcoming wave in October, this new interface for the schedule board is what's going to be the default experience. The old interface will be getting the boot. But the board is generally made up of three key parts. So you have your resource board, which is this section here in the middle. This is where all of your resources, whether they're individuals, whether they're groups of resources or crews, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, it's where their availability and all of their allocations are displayed. You can view this hourly, daily, weekly, even monthly, and can also view it both as a list, but my personal preference is as a Gantt chart, as you can see on screen. You can also view little helpful tips like utilization, which is a really useful tool to monitor workload and maintaining appropriate workloads for all of your staff. And one nice feature that Microsoft have recently added is a sync with Outlook. So what this means is that your resources can sync up Outlook with their Dynamics or field service app, and it allows calendar appointments to become visible on the scheduling boards, which means that your scheduler will make sure they don't book over anything that has been previously committed to. The second part to that is the board is the requirement panel. So the requirement panel is where all of your open and unscheduled requirements sit pending allocation. So for those that are familiar with the Dynamics world in its entirety, these are just simply views which can be configured to show the most relevant information. And this is naturally where the scheduler is going to live, first thing in the day to make sure that this is an empty list, because you want to make sure you're scheduling all the work as efficiently as possible. And the last part is the settings panel. And so these are the little setting buttons we see up the top. And these are a really useful set of tools, which include things like, your statuses. You can see there, it's the appointment statuses that sync from Outlook, booking statuses from booking records, which we'll see when we actually book a job. It gives you some visibility on some of those geo-based tools like maps. So when to Nathan's point, when you have addresses and things set up, you'll have visibility of where your resources are and where the jobs are and their routes for the day. And then your just general board configurations. And so this gives you some flexibility about what the board might actually look like. And so one of the really cool, additional features that they've introduced is the ability to have segmented boards. So you can actually have boards perhaps for different verticals or horizontals in your team. So that way you can divvy up the board, and let's say you have a scheduler who only needs to look after the sales team. Let's say in this example, they would only view the resources that are part of that team. And so what I've realized is that the new interface generally just brings a better experience in all the little ways that count, right? So the loading time, the dragging and the dropping, visualizations of all of these things, and then just generally the user experience. And so with that said, let's take a look at those two main parts. So the first one is requirement building, and then the second part will be scheduling the work. So what we saw with Nathan, when a work order is created, it automatically generates a record called a resource requirement. So this record can be treated as an extension of the work order, as it defines the requirements of the work that needs to be then met by the resource who will do the job. And so you could have multiple requirements for a particular job where multiple resources are required to complete it. And the resource requirement records can be found on the navigation panel here, or available in this view. Now, do note that the records appear in this particular view once you've actually provided the record with sufficient data. So you can see that perhaps there isn't one that we saw just created, but we're going to take a look at the record itself. So when you open up a resource requirement, for those that are familiar with other Dynamics products, it is a very familiar layout, a familiar look and feel to the record. It is just a regular Dynamics form, which means that the fields and the data points can all be customized and configured to make sure that the right information is displayed to your scheduler. So the resource requirement record, you have your general details along the left-hand side, your naming conventions, the date range as to when the job needs to be done, the duration, which is obviously the length of time required, the effort, which is a really interesting feature that allows you to ensure that you're not overloading a particular person or a particular resource on a particular day, and then your resource type, which is a really useful feature that field service has available to them. This is where we define the nature of the resource that needs to be scheduled. And so there are a variety out of the box. The first is obviously your users. So you need to configure resources which are just internal staff. You may want to configure accounts and contacts. So where accounts and contacts would be configured as a resource and then scheduled to a job. So the most common example for this is contractors. So if any one of you guys go and contract out work, then you'll have accounts and contacts in the system, and you can actually schedule those particular accounts and contacts to work orders that you have available. You have crews and pools. So this is where you may want to group resources together and allocate a little bit more efficiently that way. And then you also have equipment and facilities. So kind of self-explanatory, equipment being physical items that may need to be allocated somewhere, or perhaps facilities for businesses that have event spaces or physical spaces that need to be hired out. So all of these types of resources can be configured and then scheduled right there on the scheduling board. On the right-hand side, you have another series of records that you can associate to the requirement. You have skills, which can simply be added in, which essentially define the skill set or perhaps even the qualifications that the resource needs to have in order to complete this job. The most common examples are things like, OH&S training or police checks, working with children checks, things like that you can actually configure in the system and then define as a requirement of the resource that's going to be completing this job. Does the customer or client actually have any preferences as to who does the job? Maybe there's been an existing relationship. You're allowed to keep that personal touch, obviously, and so you can specify any preferences for this job to be allocated. Preferences as to who will actually complete this job. You have roles. Perhaps there's a specialist that you've got in your business that needs to complete the work. Maybe that is a specialist skill that you want to make sure, or a particular role that you want to apply. And then you also have preferred organization units. And this is actually a really helpful attribute to be able to define. So let's say, for example, you have 4 different offices located all around the country. There's a particular job that's really close to one office. You can say that ideally the resource that's going to be doing this job comes from this particular office. And these offices are just generally referred to as organization units. So you can define that on the resource when you configure them. You have a few other sort of generic scheduling fields. Where is the job going to be? Is it on site? Is it at a particular facility? Is it nowhere in particular? Can it be done remotely? You have the ability to prioritize the work, define the territories. You also have the ability to be a little bit more granular with when the work needs to be done. So let's say you've promised to the client that you want the job to be completed by 5 o'clock on Friday. Well, in that case, you can actually set the time from promised. And these date ranges and times are made available to the resource to make sure that when they're on the road, they know the kinds of timelines that they're going to be adhering to. And again, I want to reiterate, this is just a record that is in the Dataverse, which means that it's completely configurable and we can display information where it's most relevant. So how do we actually schedule and allocate the work to a resource? So this question is answered by firstly determining the style of resourcing that best suits the business, your people, and perhaps even the nature of the work. And so there are generally 3 styles of scheduling. So the first is manual scheduling. And so this is this sort of standard style where your scheduler, and I should specify that when I use the term scheduler, it's just representative of whoever's playing the role of allocating the work. This is where every day they access the board, they view what requirements are open, and then they can manually schedule the work via that drag and drop experience. So this was the one that we were looking at earlier, and I can simply just drag and drop it onto the board. Now, before I let go of my click, you'll also note that we have those time promised, and you can see that if you try to allocate it to a particular time that's actually beyond when we promised it, it changes to the color red. Little visual things like that I was referring to that obviously provide a nice experience or an easier experience for the scheduler. And so that would just be a simple matter of just dragging and dropping. And then what field service goes and does is it generates a booking record. And that booking record is the record that the field worker will actually use to provide details about the work that's being done and feed that back to the work order when it's closed. To Nathan's point as well about the offline, or rather the mobile app, is that if a staff member is working on a mobile device, they would still be working off of this record. They can update and enter in whether it's attachments or various fields that we've set up. They can populate all of that, and the power of the Dataverse and perhaps even some interesting flows via Power Automate allow for all of that to be updated in real time back into field service and make sure that the scheduler is kept up to date with the job at hand. The second type or style of scheduling, and this is kind of the hot topic at the moment, is semi-automated. So this is where we combine Dataverse's intelligence to recommend the most appropriate resources where it may not be clear. So the intelligence is what's called the scheduling assistant. And so what's really great about this is it's out of the box. It's something that just comes with the product and exists in the scheduling board functionality. And where do you see this? Well, when you click on a requirement, you see this little button that pops up that says Find Availability. I can then go in and click Find Availability, and it's going to go and search all the resources and suggest what they think is what the most optimal, the optimal selection of resources, and present that to you. So you can see that it's either myself or Christy Dawson, or perhaps even a sales pool, which was a group of resources where we can allocate them collectively, or just locking the time and then allocate those resources later. But these are all the options that I have. And now I can simply click on one particular resource that works. Then I have all the details in there. I can then go ahead and just click book and exit. And so that will then go and do the exact same thing that we saw, which is books the resource and then creates that booking record. You'll note that it's also disappeared because it's now a requirement that has been booked. And so if I was to click on my name, you can now see that against my resource, I now have this booking created. The third and final and increasingly popular style is taking advantage of RSO, or resource scheduling optimization, which is a fully automated process whereby you define requirements and allocation parameters and can essentially take your hands off the reins. So the result is simply bookings that we've already seen, but RSO analyzes parameters such as work time versus travel time, skill set proficiencies, optimal routes to the job, given the day or perhaps even the weather, and a number of those previously mentioned requirement attributes, after which it then goes and makes an allocation automatically. So I can't exactly demo an overnight process, but I'll use this last minute to just talk about how you take advantage of a style like that. So whilst it's a little bit daunting for some to, clearly take their hands off of a product in its entirety, Microsoft generally recommend a staged transition to this style of scheduling. So that transition includes starting with manual scheduling. So becoming familiar with the process and how the records work with each other and who does what within field service. Then you introduce the scheduling assistant to get some of those automated processes, see how you can configure the scheduling assistant and start to understand some of those automation capabilities. Then you want to move to an overnight RSO. So this is where you start to define some minimal parameters and start to let the engine run overnight. So it allocates the jobs, first thing in the morning or at 9 a.m. And then any exceptions you'll handle manually. Then you move into a single resource optimization. And so this is where you use RSO in its entirety, but for one resource. And so that just allows you to make sure that all the parameters, all the the attributes and requirements that we're building are being optimally allocated, perhaps tweaking them a little to make sure that things are as they should be. After which you can then move to a fully automated scheduling style. So it is a a bit of a journey to get there. It is important to note that RSO is part of a higher plan, which is appropriate because it tends to be justified when you have slightly higher volumes of work or perhaps even more complex types of jobs that need to be done. So that is just something to bear in mind. So it should be treated as a real piece of effort that the business needs to transition to. So I do just want to sort of finish up on one really interesting feature that I think everyone should be aware about when they are looking at field service, and that's the upcoming self-service functionality that's going to be made available over the next few release waves. And so this is where, through the power of Power Apps, no pun intended, and you will see some of these Power App capabilities later on with Troy. This is where customers and clients can actually log into a portal experience and start to provide some data points to educate or inform the scheduler. Do I have a preferred time that I want someone coming in that I want to just make sure that I let the let the business know, or is there a particular person that I want? Some of those attributes you don't need to necessarily guess. You can have someone log into a portal and provide that information, so when the scheduler logs in, they can already see what the customer's asking for, or get ahead of anything that may block an optimal day. And so I won't go too much into that. There's some fantastic documentation about this feature that's coming out, some really, really cool screenshots and demonstrations that Microsoft will be putting out about this. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. So with that said, once the work is done, it's scheduled, it gets completed by the resource and closed, after which you may begin to look towards post-work functions like updating service accounts, updating your assets and their schedules, and of course, reporting and analytics, which is what we will see next with my colleague Amor. So Amor, over to you.
Thank you, Philip. And it's amazing to see just how flexible and easy scheduling has become in Power Automate. And I'm just going to replace the screen here. Great stuff. So moving into our insights and management portion of the presentation, our operations executives and our C-level management have very different requirements when it comes to reporting and analytics from a field service operations perspective. Now, these needs are intertwined in that it's important to align data to reflect and support your business strategy. For instance, for some companies, this might be an increase in capacity for bookings by 25%, whilst at the same time attempting to decrease travel time by, let's say, 12%. And then for other companies, they would want to try and identify something like a product defect from their suppliers and optimize their procurement practices, whilst at the same time trying to decrease follow-up visits on a break fix, whilst at the same time trying to increase their first-time fix rates. Now, in order to align with these strategic objectives, it's really important to start with a solid foundation, which can feed into your success for field service. And this will effectively be items such as your work order types. Now, this, as Nathan pointed out earlier on screen, could be your inspections or installations or break fixes. Then moving on to your incident types, this is almost like a subcategory of your work order types. For instance, a broken part or a very specific type of service interruption. And then when we start looking at our rate cards, this is your price list for your products, your services, or any additional, fixed charges. And then your customer assets, if you're naturally product focused. And on customer assets specifically, by recording these assets against your customers and then being able to allocate the work orders and link it up to those customer assets, you're actually able to detect trends over time, and you can even move into a very successful preventative maintenance model as well, thereby filling up your capacity in future as well, and improving your forecasting methods. And then naturally your skills and proficiency models, as Philip pointed out, and it doesn't only just feed into more efficiently scheduling your work orders, but it also improves your insights on your operational efficiency relating to your skill set utilization over time as well. And if you are in a break-fix model kind of environment as well, then you can ultimately work towards deflection and meantime resolution. And this is basically just the components that can help you boost your customer service, which is so important today to remain competitive in the market. And once you have all these foundation aspects or foundational points in place through your field service implementation, this really helps you to start maturing towards an intelligent analytics and ultimately a prediction model that is data-driven. And in short, this means that being able to analyze historical data will allow you to move from a reactive to a proactive model to identify where improvements to your operation can be made. And ultimately working towards that. Now, as you can see on my screen, what I've got here is a snapshot of out-of-the-box field service analytics. Now, it ships with a standard set of analytics that can be enabled with literally a flip of the switch. What you're seeing at the moment is the work order summary report, which can help you gain an understanding around the number of open work orders that you have at any given point in time. You can see the average time to complete your work orders, the average time it takes for technicians to travel to and from a customer location or from one work order to the next, and whether or not you are meeting your customer expectations around your travel time or other needs, which is really, really insightful. And then this can be filtered to determine how an individual technician performs on all metrics. And I personally appreciate the flexibility that you have to zoom out and that kind of, big picture mode versus honing in on a very specific technician from a daily operational perspective as well. So you get that kind of C-level big picture look, and then you get that zoomed in day-to-day operations perception as well. And then naturally, you can also look at your insights around very specific territories. So from your work order volume to your travel time and more. And especially when you start looking at it from a regional perspective, you're able to draw specific correlations in terms of capacity across your teams or specific regional factors that might be impacting, some of your metrics and your analytics, whether it's external factors or geography-based, depending on how those resource territories are split out. Now, moving on to something that is coming up in the new release waves is our it's now in preview mode, but it is our upcoming work duration and our territory duration insights. And this is really, really amazing that's coming out now. And your upcoming work duration report provides insight on your allocated duration. So this is obviously information that we already know. This is our scheduled bookings or what our requirement record looks like. And then it actually offers us a look into our predicted duration. So in other words, how much time the system predicts that the job will take. It then points out the difference to us between the allocated, what we know, and the predicted, what we don't know. And then it also gives us a confidence score. So this is the confidence level or the likelihood that the actual duration will be as close as possible to the predicted duration. Naturally, a higher score is preferred, tells you it's more confident in that. But then what I really like is the fact that you can on the right-hand side see those prediction factors. So it's not just kind of pie in the sky crystal ball, predictions. It takes very specific factors into account. So this can be anything from customer location versus your work order type or the incident type in relation to the customer, the type of resource that you've got booked to that allocation or that booking record. And it takes those factors into consideration, and it actually tells you how each of those different factors forms part of that prediction weighting. So really, really valuable to start seeing how some of the data gets pulled together. And then taking a further look into the territory duration report. What the territory duration report shows us is, number one, it's got multiple ways that you can filter the data based on your preferences, whether it's duration or your incident type or your territory or a specific customer. Once again, this really gives you that ability to kind of have a big picture view of it versus a honed in closer view. And beneath the filters, what you'll see are your analytics that will highlight your important measurable elements that are related to your organization. So it's your number of resources that are involved in your bookings, the number of completed bookings at that point in time. And then it also shows you your over and your underestimated bookings. Now, this is compared with the actual duration. And then it also just gives you an overall proficiency score. And these are just, kind of very quick metrics. I think, starting your day with a dashboard type of view. And then you can start going into what you see in that blue visualization, the booking volume, which shows your number of bookings over your chosen filters, and which is really, really great for trend analysis over time, and also in collaboration with other filters. And then adjacent to this, in the red and the green, would be your booking durations. And this compares your over and your underestimated bookings over the chosen filters, which I really love this for drawing your correlations in terms of your data. And then from there, you're also able to see additional customer metrics and additional incident type metrics. And these sets of analytics are really, really valuable when you're starting out with field service as a solution. I love this, that this is without additional investment. You flip the switch, the insights start populating after a couple of hours as it works through the data. And this really goes beyond that skateboard approach, which helps support your business strategy. And thank you. I'll be handing over to Troy now, and he'll be able to give you some more information on the extensions through the Powered platform.
So today I'm going to take a session home with a bit of a run through of what the Power Platform is and how Power Platform relates back to field service. So on our agenda, what is Power Platform? To bring us all into the same space, what Power Platform can do for field service, and we'll look at some examples of how we can enhance field service using the Power Platform. Let's get straight in. Power Platform is a set of solutions and capabilities provided by Microsoft that you can use to enhance any Microsoft application and even applications outside the Microsoft stack. I'll walk through some of the key ones that we're going to focus on today, and then we'll jump into some examples and see how it works in the real world. So Power Apps is the application builder capability of the Power Platform. When we say application builder, it can build applications like you have with field service, that interface. We call it a model-driven application that focuses on business data, or we can build the apps that you are typically used to running on a mobile device or a tablet. That sort of Uber style or Uber Eats, anything that is pixel perfect and is fit for purpose for what it needs to do. We also have Power Automate, which provides hyper automation. And now hyper automation is not a fancy word that we made up to make it sound more exciting. Hyper automation actually refers to workflow capabilities. It's actually something that Gartner have actually got on the list of top 20 technologies to look at in the next year. And hyper automation includes the workflows that we expect to have, looks at robotic process automation, using AI, using machine learning, as all part of your automation processes. And the Power Automate actually brings that to the table as well. Then we have Power BI, which is the business intelligence and data visualization. Amor touched on that in her session. It's sort of baked into the product. What we can do though is we can use the same data sources, and if we need to do any custom reporting or something that is a little bit out of the ordinary or not doesn't fit sort of as a round peg into a round hole, we can do something more and have it as visualization on top of the data we have. Potentially even bring data from other systems so we can do comparisons and what ifs. We have Power Virtual Agent, which is basically a bot builder tool. A really great way of having your customers or even your staff interact with an intelligent bot that can take them through a scenario. And this bot leverages Power Automate to actually talk to the backend system. In this case, it'll be field service, and have an intelligent conversation with intelligent data. And last but not least, on the sort of front-end stuff is Power Pages, which is a portal building application. Think about WordPress style building, but with your data in the background. In field service, typically we'd look at using the default portal, but if we needed to have a customer-facing portal, a B2B portal, B2C portal, we could use Power Pages or to build that scenario. Supporting all these, we have over 600 connectors. We'll talk about connectors in a bit more detail in one of the slides, so I'll leave it for then. We have the AI Builder, which is the AI capabilities leveraging the Azure functionality that Azure has had for many years and making it available through low code. And then we have Dataverse access, and Dataverse is what field service is built on. So we have ability to talk to Dataverse, work with Dataverse, and even extend Dataverse using the Power Platform. So let's run through what can the Power Platform do for field service. Two main scenarios: increase worker productivity. We want to make sure that when the field service agent reaches the point where they have to do something, that they have all the tools available for them to do that. And sometimes the native application might not have everything. We might need something specific. And here we can actually go and increase their efficiency and the productivity when they get on site. And we'll look at a few examples of that when I go into the Power Platform building side. We also want to make sure that we can optimize service operations. And this is where being able to take what field service does really well out of the box and enhance it, look at bottlenecks in processes, look at where a process might not be supported natively or not have been part of the product, and we can actually go and extend that. And when we increase that worker productivity and we optimize the service operations, we end up delivering proactive service, which makes people like me, the customer, really happy because things are working really, really well. Cool. So enough about the theory. Let's look at some of the practical examples. I'm going to take you through 3 different scenarios, and these are quite real world, and give an idea of where these fit in. And we'll try and use examples as much as possible. So Power Platform, Power Apps. So fit for purpose apps. So Power Apps gives the ability to extend field service with an application that is fit for purpose where you need it. Because sometimes the out-of-the-box app doesn't cut it. There's a really great out-of-the-box app for field service, but it is a field service app. So it has a lot of different fields you might have to fill in. It wants you to step through the process very similar to what you would have in the model-driven app. And in some cases, the field service agent doesn't have the time and potentially doesn't even have the knowledge in place to do that. So this is when we can start using Power Apps to actually build a custom interface that is fit for purpose for the field service agent, and even sometimes for the back office as well. Power Apps, you can create a custom app that will run on mobile. It will run on your tablet, desktop, or browser. It is no application it can't run in. It's basically built up technology that will run in any type of device. So you can build the app and have it embedded into an existing application. You can embed it into Power BI. You can embed the app into field service itself, or you can have it run as a custom app on an Android device or iOS device that leverages all the capabilities of the device, like geolocation, cameras, barcode scanners, and all those really fun features. And best of all, same data source. You have a fit for purpose experience, but you use the exact same data sources that you have in field service. So we aren't creating new data, we're leveraging the same table structure, same business rules, very cool, and all the same dependencies. On screen, I have a mock-up of an app that we actually built for a customer where they have to do send service agents out to support vehicles, to do vehicle maintenance. So the default app was a little bit too clunky for the guys who were doing the work, so we came with a very simple app. When you opened up, it logged in and said there is the case that's attached to you, and when you clicked on the update actions, it showed you what you had to do. So we had a secondary table of, depending on what vehicle you were allocated to service, what type of service was required for that vehicle, and what you had to do based on that. So it was a 1,000 kilometer service for a ute, you got certain actions. If it was a 10,000 kilometer service for a excavator, certain actions. So nice custom interface, very easy, large buttons. So people that are doing servicing can just click on the button, move through and see what's next. So this is the example of where you can actually enhance the default capability with a custom interface. We also provided something on the last picture over here with we'll show you the different vehicle types, where you could add a new asset, because this specific customer, sometimes once the guys have gone out and done the service request, if they were on site and there was time and the customer had another vehicle or another item that needed to be serviced, they could then automatically say, fine, I will do that. They could add that service request. So they could create service requests against the regional request on demand. Instead of going back and saying, well, log a request with our head office and I'll send it through, they were able to do it themselves. So really, really cool functionality. Power Automate, the high automation process. I've put a little bit of a blurb at the bottom of the screen where it talks through some of the things we talk about high automation, but we'll run through that a bit later. So with the Power Automate that we are very familiar with, we have the ability to run either event-based workflows or also use the embedded app experience. I'll look at the embedded app experience in a moment. And I'm going to quickly go through a scenario, real life scenario. This happened to me a couple of weeks back. I had a heat pump installed. The process was phenomenal. SMSs from the company telling me when they're coming, who the technician is, what time they're arriving, what they're going to do. They did a site visit. It was awesome. I took off time from work. The guy came around in the morning. He installed the heat pump downstairs in my house, and he said the spark is coming this afternoon to do the wiring. No worries. And I was super happy. And then it started raining. Sparky arrived and said, I can't work in rain or working outside. My ladder won't fit. And it's a health and safety issue. I'll come back tomorrow. That's very frustrating for the customer. And that is not efficient as well from a resourcing point of view. So what if, when the Sparky indicated in the subcategory, as Nathan mentioned in the first session, that he was en route to the customer, a workflow kicked off, an event-based workflow. When that work order was updated, I went and got the weather forecast for where the customer is, because I've got his address, and said, hey, at the moment it says it's raining in the North Shore. Please don't go. It's a waste of your time. You're going to have to do something else. Please go and reschedule, and let the customer know, hey, our Sparky can't come now because it's raining. It's a health and safety issue. This is what we're talking about. We talk about event-based workflows, and we can connect to any system. And those systems can be part of Office 365, part of the Dynamics Sphere, or outside. So this could potentially even be a call out to a third-party application that another vendor uses that might be providing a service as well. For the inline experience, this is a snapshot of the work orders table. You've seen it in the previous demos. I'm able to actually go and create my own workflows and see what workflows have been created against this. So if I have a specific workflow or there's a business requirement, that I am able to select a case and then click on it and then have something happen, like maybe notify a vendor or send the customer a message saying, hey, we can't come now, it's raining. I can do that. This doesn't replace the workflows that are in field service at the ready. These are just ways of enhancing it very easy. And all these are low code, no code. So there's no need to bring in a developer to write something. We can actually do that using the configuration approach. We have over 600 cloud connectors for Power Automate, and these connectors are available across the whole stack, which means that if there's a connector available, I can use it. If there isn't a connector available, you can create your own connectors because it's all open standards. So no matter what system you need to talk to, as part of your automation process, you can go and create your own connector for it. And then one of my favorite features just came out last year, has gone GA recently, is the Process Advisor. The Process Advisor looks at your automation, and it can be an automation that is cloud-based, so it's a flow that you're actually running through, or it can be an automation of a process. As long as you are able to timestamp and show the process and data, for instance, in a database or Dataverse, you can run the Process Automate Advisor against that, and it will come back and give you suggestions of where your process potentially needs to be optimized. It'll discover bottlenecks, it'll look at the longest path, shortest path, and give you a sense of how long each step is actually taking. And you can set metrics against it to say, well, this step should not take more than 10 hours, and if so, highlighted red. This is a wonderful tool, and it's available as part of the Power Automate stack right now, which is really, really awesome. Cool. Moving on. This is the fun stuff. So the AI builder, so adding intelligence to your business. Microsoft, as part of the Azure stack, have got a lot of AI capabilities that they've been growing over the last decade. Everything from being able to do object detection, sentiment analysis. They've got a lot of machine learning that's running in the background that they've now made available as low-code solutions into the Power Platform. So one of them, the one we have on screen now, for instance, is object detection. You can train a model without knowing any code, just uploading pictures and going through a tagging process. You can train a model how to detect objects. So in this case, we've got some cans of tea. It could be cans on a shelf. It could be logos. It could be bananas, it could be fruit, it could be anything that you can run through and train the AI to recognize on a regular basis. You can then take that AI capability and embed that into the applications or into your process that you have. So take a field service agent that is part of a merchandising crew. They go out, they go and place the items on a shelf. They've got to make sure they have a certain space to work at. They can then take their field service app that they've got and say, right, I've done the job now. I'm going to close it, and says, right, please take a picture. Take a picture. It then says, right, I've counted that you've got 10 cans on the shelf because I've used the object detection to verify that you've got 10 cans of Coke, 3 cans of Fanta, and 15 cans of LNP. That's really cool. That can then be pushed back into the service record all the way back as part of that work orders fruition, and you'll be able to have it as a historic event. We also have document validation and data extraction as part of the AI Builder capability. So in this specific case, you're able to scan a document from the mobile device or during a workflow process, extract the data and use that inside your process. So the scenario that we have on screen here is an ID validation. So if there is a specific scenario where I need to validate the person, I could scan their New Zealand driver's license, and even in the backend have Power Automate reach out to a backend API and say, yes, this is actually a valid automation. You can use the same thing for document extraction. So scanning invoices, scanning any type of document, extract the data and make that part of your process. For anything from accounts receivable to just scanning a letter of confirmation or getting a signature from a customer. My last slide just is to talk a little bit more about the other capabilities you can do. When we go into the app build, we can bring in things like mixed reality. So mixed reality allows us to use our phone to aim at, take an object like we have on screen now, which is a 3D rendering of a robot in a factory, and actually go into the factory and place that on the factory floor, see what it will physically look like, take a picture of it, send it back in. So with the person coming around to my house to do the heat pump installation, one of the things they need to do was a site visit. So they came around and they took a whole bunch of pictures and they sent it back to the office. And the guy came to visit. I said to him, do you know we're installing the heat pump? He went, yep. And he showed me the pictures and there was a circle drawn around it. It was on his phone. He'd been the original person. We could do that like we have in this about a year, where through the markup feature and mixed reality embedded into a field service application, I can go to a site, mark where things are going to go. My handwriting is terrible. I was trying to use my finger when I did this demo, so not the best writing. Mark where I'm putting the tables, make a note that that's going to be the table I'm going to be used. Put up there. That's where the chairs are going. Oh, really, I can't write for it all. And once I've got that, I can snapshot it. It remembers where I am, so I can do. It's not a problem. I can move around. All the objects are there. Snapshot that, and then I can take that and push that into my work order and push that back and say, fine, there it is. And everything is now just in part of system of record. And the last thing I want to talk about before we move on is we also have the ability with the applications to do the type of things you expect from our mobile applications. So we can scan QR codes, we can scan barcodes, which means if we can do that scanning, they can reach back into the system and into field service, get the data from an asset you might be servicing, maybe get a workshop manual, maybe based off a scan, get an idea of when the device was last serviced. And these are all available as part of the Power Platform's capabilities. There are a lot more. But I have run out of time, so thank you very much and hand back to Gareth.
So, hey, I want to say thanks to our presenters. I don't know if anyone had the impression today, but this team is very passionate about field services. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly or via our website, as they'll be more than happy to elaborate further on any topics covered today. Other than that, we'll let you get to your next meeting. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Take care and goodbye.